I signed the contract without reading it. I only knew two things. He was a billionaire alpha, and I was his surrogate. What I didn't know? He had no intention of using science. He intended to breed me the old-fashioned way. Chapter 1. The Blood Price. You'll never see the father. You'll never ask about the child. You'll carry the baby to term naturally and deliver it. Then you'll disappear with your payment. That's the deal. The voice was female, cold, clinical, like a scalpel gliding over a vein. Maelina Vexley stared down at the pristine white contract that rested on the cheap oak table in front of her. It was embossed with a silver sigil, 2 wolves circling a crescent moon, but bore no names, no signatures yet. Just one blank line at the bottom, waiting for her consent. Her hand trembled as she clutched the pen. She hadn't even been allowed to read the whole document. The courier had told her that the client was discreet, filthy rich, impossibly powerful, and very traditional. Maelina had barely gotten through 3 pages before the woman in the white coat snapped the folder shut and slid it back across the table. "You either sign now or we offer it to the next girl," she said sharply, adjusting her latex gloves. Maelina's heart thudded hard behind her ribs. Her little brother Kai needed surgery, soon. A rare degenerative blood disease had taken away his voice at age 8 and would take his life before he turned 12. They didn't have the money for another hospital admission, let alone a transplant. No bank would loan to a jobless, parentless 21-year-old. The city had already chewed her up and spat her out. She had no one left to ask, except this faceless alpha with bottomless pockets who wanted to rent her womb like a hotel room. Maelina blinked, suddenly aware of the fluorescent light flickering overhead. Her throat was dry, her palms slick with sweat. The pen felt heavy in her grip. Final. What does it mean by naturally? She asked in a whisper, her voice betraying her nerves. The woman in the coat didn't answer. Her lips twitched with the faintest smirk. You'll find out soon enough. That night, it rained. Not the gentle kind. The kind that makes cities feel like they're drowning. The kind that makes you wonder if the sky is angry. Maelina stood outside the orphanage with a single suitcase and a single lie. She'd told Kai she got a nanny job for rich people, and she'd be sending money soon. He believed her. He always believed her. A black limousine the length of a hearse pulled up beside the gate. The tinted window slid down, revealing a broad-shouldered man in a dark tailored suit. The air that spilled from the window smelled like chilled leather, expensive whiskey, and something else. Something animal. The man didn't introduce himself, just opened the door. She hesitated. Rain slid down her arms, soaking her sleeves, clinging to her chest. Her heart screamed for her to run, but her feet moved anyway. She got in. The door closed with a heavy thump, and the world outside vanished. Inside, the air was silent. The only sound was the subtle click of the lock. "You signed the contract," the man said finally, without looking at her. His voice was gravel and silk, low, calm, powerful. "That makes you mine." Maelina's head snapped up. "I'm not anyone's." The man turned then, and she forgot how to breathe. He was devastatingly beautiful in a brutal, predatory way. A sharp jaw, lips that looked like they'd never smiled, and eyes, those eyes, gold like firelight through amber. Eyes that weren't human. He leaned closer. "You don't even know who you're carrying for, do you?" Maelina shook her head, her voice caught in her throat. "You're carrying my heir, Miss Vexley," he said with quiet finality, "and I don't breed through tubes or doctors." A chill slid down her spine. She shrank back into the seat. "You mean, you?" "I mean the way nature intended. You, me, heat, submission." His lips curled faintly. "You will not be inseminated. You will be claimed." The Kaelwyn estate sat on a cliff overlooking the sea. 300 acres of shadowed woods, black iron fences, and a manor carved from obsidian stone. The gates opened with a mechanical groan, and the car drove through like it was entering hell itself. The house loomed in the distance, monstrous and medieval, with sharp spires that pierced the sky. They didn't speak as they drove through a winding path of trees and statues, stone wolves with glowing red eyes that almost seemed to watch her. The limousine finally stopped beneath a massive awning of ivy and iron. The driver opened her door. "Welcome to your new cage," the man said softly. Maelina stepped out, blinking up at the towering manor. "What's your name?" she asked suddenly. "You never told me." He paused, then turned slowly, the light catching in his eyes. My name is Thorne Kaelwyn, he said. Alpha of the Kaelwyn clan, billionaire, here-maker, king of wolves. And you? He stepped closer, his gaze dropping to her lips. You're the only untouched Omega in this city worth breaking. Chapter 2. The Mansion of Wolves. The mansion's silence was not peaceful. It was oppressive, too still. Like a breath held for too long, Maelina's soaked shoes echoed on the marble as she followed Alpha Thorne Kaelwyn through the entrance hall of the Kaelwyn estate. Her fingers curled tightly around the handle of her small, beaten-up suitcase, and her eyes darted from one thing to the next, like a wild animal in foreign territory. The ceiling was so high it vanished into shadows. Crystal chandeliers flickered above, but the light was dim, deliberately moody. The floor beneath her was black marble veined with crimson. Bloodstone, she guessed. Every wall bore ancestral portraits, most of them wolves in various forms, feral and regal, some mid-shift, their eyes following her like ghostly sentinels. The air smelled faintly of pine, something spicy like burnt cedarwood, and something else. Muskier, masculine. His scent, she could feel it pressing against her skin like invisible hands. I don't like silence, she said suddenly, voice small and fragile against the cavernous hush. It feels like something's watching. Thorne stopped walking, his head turned just slightly, a sliver of his profile catching the low light, sharp cheekbone, straight nose, perfectly sculpted lips that hadn't shown even the ghost of a smile since she met him. Good, he said. Because something is... He kept walking. They passed what must have been 5 sitting rooms, a hall lined with obsidian statues, and at least 2 staircases leading who knew where before he stopped in front of a tall double door made of onyx and carved with runes she didn't recognize. He turned the handle and pushed it open. This is where you'll stay, he said. Maelina blinked. She had expected cold stone and chains, maybe a cot. Instead, the room was beautiful. It was large, larger than the entire orphanage wing where she'd grown up. A fireplace burned low in the wall, its glow painting everything in warm amber. A 4-poster bed sat at the center, carved from dark wood, its blankets thick and soft-looking. A wall of windows faced the sea, where lightning flashed in the distance like war drums in the sky. A vanity, a wardrobe, a plush chair and thick rugs, even a small bookshelf. I didn't expect this, she whispered, setting her suitcase down slowly, unsure if this was some kind of trick. Thorne leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her with cool amusement. You thought I'd throw you in a dungeon? Maelina didn't answer. You're not a prisoner, Maelina, he said softly. You're a vessel. Vessels are cared for, nourished, protected. She flinched at the word. You mean, until I give birth, she said. Then I'm forgotten. He tilted his head. Not forgotten, compensated. There was a long pause. The fire crackled. Can I ask you something? She said finally. His gold eyes met hers. She took a breath. Why didn't you just use IVF? Like normal people do? Thorne pushed off the frame, walking slowly into the room like a shadow come to life. He didn't touch her, but his presence engulfed her like a second skin. Every cell in her body screamed to shrink, to hide, to submit. But she held her ground. He stopped just inches from her. His eyes dropped to her lips, then her throat. Because I'm not normal, he said quietly. And neither are you. Her brows furrowed. I'm just a girl. No, he murmured. You're an Omega. And not just any Omega, you're one of the last of your kind. She stared at him, confused. I don't... You're sent, he cut in, his voice darker now. It doesn't lie. You've been hiding in the human world for years, masking it. But my wolves caught it the moment you stepped out of your apartment. You're wild blood, unmarked, unclaimed, and pure. That's why the contract says natural conception only. Her heart thundered. I don't know anything about Omegas or packs or wolves, she whispered. I was raised in the city. I never shifted. I thought my mother, she said I wasn't like them. She lied. The word hit her like a slap. She hid you, he said, voice softening just slightly. Probably to protect you. Your bloodline is old, Maelina, royal. The elders told me your family vanished after the purge. I don't know what that means. It means, he said, voice turning sharp, that your womb is the most valuable thing in the shifter world. She felt sick. I didn't ask for this. No, he said. But you signed for it. That night, after he left, Maelina sat curled in the armchair by the fire, blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. She had refused the silk pajamas laid out for her and wore her old t-shirt and leggings instead, like armor. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face. Alpha Thorne Kaelwyn. He was too perfect, too composed. Like he was carved from stone and dipped in sin, but there had been something else, something in his eyes for a brief moment, when he spoke of natural conception. Hunger. Not just physical desire. Need. Something primal, untamed, aching to be unleashed. She felt it in her gut, and worse. Something in her own blood stirred in answer. In the dead of night she heard it. A howl, low, mournful, close, then another, and another. The woods beyond the manor were alive with wolves, a pack, dozens of them, maybe more. She stood barefoot and padded toward the window. Lightning illuminated the forest in the distance. Thunder rolled over the sea, and in the clearing below the cliff, she saw him, Thorne, naked, his body marked with silver tattoos that shimmered in the stormlight. His head was tilted back, eyes glowing gold, and he was howling, commanding his pack. A moment later, a dozen wolves emerged from the trees, black and silver and midnight blue, surrounding him in reverence. Her breath caught. He wasn't just rich. He wasn't just alpha. He was king. And she was about to be bred by him. Chapter 3. Heat beneath ice. The next morning, Maelina awoke to a note. It was placed neatly on the nightstand beside her bed, folded crisply, its edges too sharp to be casual. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes, the fire in the hearth having long since burned out. Shadows still clung to the corners of the room, even as early light bled in through the tall windows. Her fingers hesitated over the paper. Miss Vexley, breakfast is at 9. The doctor will arrive at 10. The claiming ritual is scheduled for the full moon. Thorne Kaelwyn. She stared at the words in silence, her mouth dry. The claiming ritual? The phrase vibrated through her chest like a bell rung too deep. She had read shifter legends before, just half-remembered myths in cheap paperback romances when she was younger, but never believed them. Ceremonial mating, blood rites, heat binding, forced submission. It all sounded like fiction. Now it was her reality, and her body, traitorous and confused, remembered the way she'd seen Thorne standing bare-chested in the moonlight the night before, the power in his howl, the silver runes etched into his skin, the wolves circling him like worshippers around a god. What does it mean to be claimed? Her mind supplied answers she didn't want to think about. By 9 a.m., Maelina was seated at a breakfast table so large it could have served a banquet. She wore the simplest dress she could find from the wardrobe, soft gray cotton with long sleeves, and tied her hair back in a messy bun. She didn't want to look like a temptress. She wanted to look invisible. But Thorne noticed her the second he entered the room. He didn't just look, he took her in, slowly, hungrily, like a predator assessing a meal. He was dressed in a black silk shirt, sleeves rolled up to the elbows, veins and forearms flexing like live wires beneath his skin. His slacks were tailored, but it was the stillness of him that radiated danger. Everything about him screamed restraint, and underneath that restraint, pure, violent dominance. "Sleep well?" he asked as he sat across from her. "I didn't sleep," she replied coolly, keeping her voice even. "Because of the wolves? Because of you." A corner of his mouth curved, just slightly. Not quite a smirk, not quite warm. Something darker. "You watched me last night. You were howling. Like an animal. I am an animal." She didn't reply. Instead, she cut into the eggs on her plate with deliberate quiet. The tension between them had grown thick, like fog before a thunderstorm. Thorne picked up a piece of toast, bit into it, and chewed slowly. "I meant what I said," he added a moment later. "You are not a prisoner here, but if you run, I will find you, and I won't be as gentle next time." "I didn't ask for gentleness," she muttered. He froze mid-chew. For a heartbeat, she thought she'd overstepped, that he'd rise from his seat and show her just how little power she had. Instead, his gold eyes gleamed with something unreadable. Amusement, hunger, approval. "You're not what I expected," he said, voice low. "You either," she said, without looking up. At 10 a.m. the doctor arrived. Not a man, a woman, tall, with silver hair braided tight, and eyes the color of smoke. She wore a black lab coat and carried a steel case. "Sit," she said without introduction. nodding toward the fainting couch near the window. Maelina obeyed, tense and suspicious. The woman snapped on a pair of gloves and began her examination without fanfare. She measured Maelina's vitals, took blood samples, listened to her heartbeat. "You've never shifted?" she asked abruptly. Maelina flinched. "No. No signs of heat, not once. I didn't know I was whatever I am." The woman hummed, then pulled out a small silver disc, no bigger than a coin, and pressed it to the back of Maelina's neck. A faint warmth bloomed beneath her skin. "What are you?" The woman cut her off. "Tracking implant. You're too valuable to lose." Maelina jolted. "You didn't ask my permission. Your body was signed over to the Kaelwyn estate," she replied flatly. "Consent was given the moment your blood touched the contract." A fresh wave of nausea rolled over Maelina. "How long until the ritual?" she whispered. The doctor stood. 3 days. "The moon will be full by then. Will it hurt?" The woman met her gaze without flinching. "Yes." Later that night, Maelina found the locked door. She wasn't looking for it, but the east wing of the manor was colder, older, like it hadn't been touched in decades. Dust lay thick over the carved banisters. The portraits on the walls were cracked. The scent of pine and wolf was stronger here. She turned a corner and found a single black door at the end of the hall. It was carved with a crescent moon, but no handle, no keyhole, just a shimmering rune in the center, glowing faintly blue. Maelina reached out instinctively. The moment her fingers brushed it, the rune flared white-hot, and a pulse slammed through her skull like a scream. She fell to her knees, clutching her head, her ears ringing with some ancient sound she didn't understand. A chant, a voice, a memory not her own. Then, silence. A moment later, footsteps echoed behind her. She turned. Thorne stood at the top of the hall, his eyes burning gold in the gloom. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "What's behind the door?" she asked, voice trembling. His gaze darkened. "The truth. About me?" He didn't answer. She rose slowly, brushing off her hands, still shaking. "I don't want to be part of some blood ritual," she said. "I just wanted to save my brother." Thorne descended the stairs. "You already are," he said. "You signed in blood. You let my scent on your skin. You opened the bond. I didn't mean to—" "But your body did." He reached her then, and without touching her, he tilted his head, inhaling softly. "You're starting to feel it, aren't you?" he whispered. "The hunger, the ache. No." "Yes," he said, his voice a growl. "Your heat is waking, Omega, and when it peaks, your body will beg me to finish what we started." She ran. Not far, just down the hall, but her legs shook beneath her, her pulse a drumbeat of terror and confusion and something else, want. She slammed the door to her room and locked it. Thorne didn't follow, but she knew he didn't have to. In the middle of the night, Maelina woke sweating, the sheets tangled around her limbs. Her skin felt too tight, her core throbbing in a way she didn't understand. It wasn't pain, it wasn't sickness, it was need. She bit her lip hard, trying to ignore the scent in the air, the phantom smell of cedar and smoke and alpha musk that clung to her skin. Her hand trembled as she touched her lower belly. A spark raced through her. Was it the beginning of the pregnancy, or the beginning of something else? She didn't know. All she knew was that her body was no longer just her own. Chapter 4. The Awakening. Maelina didn't leave her room for the next 2 days. Not because she was locked in. Thorne had made sure her freedom remained intact. No, the confinement was her own choice, her own fear. Because something inside her had begun to shift. It wasn't just the pulse between her legs or the fever under her skin, though both had begun to steadily rise. It was something deeper, primal, something her human mind couldn't name but her blood recognized, like an ancient chord had been struck, and every nerve inside her was trembling from the echo. The first time she noticed the change, it was subtle. She opened her eyes that morning and could smell the roses in the garden below her window, from inside the manor. Their scent was so vivid, so rich she could taste it. By noon she could hear heartbeats. The maids, 2 floors down, and that night, when she passed the mirror on her way to the bath, she saw something. Her pupils dilated wider than they should have in the dark. Her skin glowed faintly in the firelight, but it was the look in her own eyes that made her stumble. Predatory, feral, frightened. On the 3rd morning, there was a knock at the door. 3 gentle taps. Maelina sat up from the floor, where she'd fallen asleep in a pile of blankets, sweating and restless. Her body was trembling, Her inner thighs were slick with something shameful, and the ache between her legs was no longer ignorable. Her eyes had changed color during the night, her irises now ringed with gold. "Who is it?" she asked, voice raspier than it had ever been. "It's Scylla," came the soft voice of the doctor. "I brought something to help you." Maelina hesitated, then unlocked the door. Scylla stepped in quietly. Carrying a small silver box with velvet lining, she studied Maelina for a long moment before speaking. "Your heat has begun." Maelina sat down hard on the edge of the bed. "I thought I wouldn't get one. I thought—" She swallowed. "I'm a virgin. Virginity doesn't stop biology," Scylla replied. "Your omega traits were only dormant, not dead. And now, proximity to an alpha, especially one like Thorne, is waking everything up." Maelina turned her face toward the fire. "What's in the box?" she asked. Scylla opened it slowly, revealing a long, gleaming chain and a pendant shaped like a teardrop. The gem pulsed faintly, humming with low energy. "It's a suppressant stone," she explained. "It'll dull the symptoms, give you a little more time before your first full heat peaks." Maelina didn't reach for it. Scylla narrowed her eyes. "You're hesitating." "I don't know what I want," Maelina admitted. "I thought I was doing this for the money, for my brother's treatment. But now—" She looked down at her hands, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "Now I dream of him." Scylla didn't look surprised. "That's the bond. Once the alpha scent imprints in your system, the fantasies come. You'll feel pulled to him, not just sexually but emotionally, instinctually. You'll crave his approval, his protection, his touch." Maelina clenched her hands. "I hate it." "No, you don't," Scylla said softly. "You hate how much you want it." Later that night, she stood in front of the mirror again, wearing only a silk robe that barely clung to her skin. The suppressant stone hung around her neck, and it did help. The fever was a little lower, the need in her belly dulled, but her heart still raced every time she thought of him. She didn't want to think about the claiming ritual, but she couldn't stop. She remembered Thorne's words. "When your heat peaks, your body will beg me to finish what we started." Would it? Or had it already started? At midnight, she left her room. The hallways were dark, only faint candlelight flickering from the sconces. Her bare feet made no sound as she walked toward the west wing. She didn't know what drove her there, only that she could feel him. His scent was thick in the air, curling like smoke around her brain. Her wolf senses were sharper now, leading her like an invisible leash, dragging her closer with each breath. She stopped in front of a door carved with obsidian wolves. She didn't knock. She opened it. Thorne stood by the fireplace, his shirt half unbuttoned, glass of whiskey in hand. His hair was slightly damp from a shower, curling faintly at the edges, and his eyes gleamed like fire through smoke. He didn't look surprised to see her. "I was wondering how long you'd resist," he said quietly. Maelina stepped inside, heart pounding, robe clinging to her thighs. "I'm not here for you," she lied. "Then why are you here?" he asked, swirling the whiskey lazily. "You could barely look at me yesterday." She hated how much he affected her. "I want answers," she said. "What's the claiming ritual really? What are you planning to do to me?" He studied her, then set down his glass. "The ritual is sacred," he said, "thousands of years old. It's how a pack binds its next generation, through blood, through heat, through the first breeding." She shivered. "You make it sound like a sacrifice." "In some ways it is," he said, walking closer. "But not just yours. Mine too." He stopped a breath away from her. "You think I'm unaffected by this? That this doesn't burn me alive every time you walk into a room smelling like lightning and heat and untouched omega blood?" His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I've waited years for someone like you, needed someone like you. My wolf is on the verge of breaking free." Her breath hitched. "Then why haven't you touched me?" His eyes blazed. "Because once I do—" He reached out, brushing the edge of her jaw with the back of his fingers. "I won't stop." Her body trembled. "Maybe I don't want you to." "Don't say that," he growled, voice thick with restraint. "Not unless you mean it." She didn't speak. She leaned in slightly. Then she kissed him. It was soft, hesitant, barely a brush of lips. But it shattered the tension like a glass dropped in silence. Thorne grabbed her by the waist, pulling her flush against his body, and kissed her back. Hard, deep, like a starving man feasting for the first time. Her fingers fisted in his shirt. His hand cupped the back of her head. And for a moment, just a moment, they weren't Alpha and Surrogate. They were two people caught in a storm too big to stop. When they broke apart, their foreheads pressed together, Maelina's lips were swollen, and Thorne's chest was heaving. "We shouldn't," she whispered. "No," he said. "We shouldn't." But his hand slipped to the curve of her hip, pulling her tighter. And she didn't stop him. Chapter 5. The Moon Demands Blood. The night of the full moon arrived like a predator. The air in the manor was thick with tension. Even the walls seemed to pulse with invisible rhythm, echoing the ancient call of the blood moon rising over the forests of Blackvale. Outside, the wolves were already howling, low, long, endless. Their voices rolled across the pine-covered mountains like a war drum. Inside the Kaelwyn estate, every alpha in the region had already gathered in reverent silence, cloaked in black, masked in silver. Not one of them dared speak the name of the woman chosen to be the alpha's surrogate, because that name, whispered aloud, held power. Maelina Vexley, the virgin who had unknowingly walked into a kingdom ruled by beasts. The untouched Omega whose blood had answered the ancient bond of the Kaelwyn line. And tonight, under the cruel beauty of the full moon, she was to be claimed, not as a servant, not as a sacrifice, but as a bride of instinct, and the vessel for a bloodline cursed to extinction. She woke burning. It wasn't like fever or sickness, it was deeper, hungrier. Her thighs were slick, her pulse erratic, her skin hypersensitive to even the brush of the silk sheets. Her chest heaved, her core throbbed, and her wolf, the part of her she'd never known existed, was wide awake and starving. The suppressant stone she wore around her neck had cracked in two, not broken, shattered. She was past help now, past reason, and she wanted him. Gods help her. She needed him. A knock came, then silence. Then the door creaked open, and a tall figure entered the shadows of her room. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His scent hit her like a drug. Cedar, cold iron. Alpha. Maelina's mouth parted, her breath shallow. The gown she wore clung to every curve of her body like mist over water, sheer and damp with sweat. Her hair stuck to her neck. Her pupils dilated when he stepped into the moonlight. Thorne Kaelwyn. He was shirtless, his body covered in dark runes that shimmered with silver light. His wolf mark was glowing on his chest, right over his heart. His eyes were all gold now, no human left, no restraint. He had waited long enough, and so had she. "You came," she whispered, voice trembling with something far too fragile to name. "You called," he growled. She didn't remember calling, but her scent had... He crossed the room in 3 strides. His hands grabbed her, cupping her jaw with gentleness that betrayed the fire behind his grip. Their mouths met again, no longer hesitant, no longer soft. This was claiming... Her body surged against him, her thighs pressing around his hips, and he lifted her, like she weighed nothing. Her back slammed against the wall with a moan, legs wrapped around his waist. "You smell like fire," he hissed against her neck, like storm and submission. "Do you know what you're doing to me?" "Show me," she whispered. He bit her, not hard, but enough to make her gasp. And the moment his fangs grazed her skin, her body screamed for more. His hands roamed under her gown, finding heat and slickness he hadn't expected. "You're already wet," he growled. "I've been wet for days," she admitted, breathless. "I can't stop. I can't." "You don't have to." He carried her to the ceremonial chamber in silence, her arms wrapped around his neck, face buried in his shoulder. She didn't protest. Her body knew where they were going. So did his. Neither of them was truly human anymore, not under the influence of the blood moon. The ceremonial chamber was a hidden sanctuary beneath the manor. Torches flickered along the walls, ancient symbols glowing with sacred heat. The stone table in the center was covered in black fur and crimson velvet. Runes danced on the floor like veins of living fire. Thorne placed her down like a sacred offering. But when he looked into her eyes, he didn't see a victim. He saw his mate. "Tell me to stop," he said one final time. Maelina touched his cheek. "I came here to save my brother," she said softly. "But I didn't know I was saving myself too." Then she pulled the string at her shoulder, and her gown fell to the floor. She stood naked before him, unashamed, unbroken. And what happened next was not soft. It was ruthless. Thorne dropped to his knees and kissed the inside of her thighs, until she begged him to take her. His tongue found her folds, tasted her slick heat, made her cry out his name again and again. She was shaking, clutching at the fur beneath her, gasping for air, when he finally rose and entered her first. Her scream echoed through the chamber like a war cry. She was tight, so tight, and untouched. He buried himself to the hilt, growling against her throat, his fangs grazing her pulse. She clawed at his back. Tears streaked her cheeks, not from pain but from overwhelm, from the weight of the bond crashing through her soul. "Mate," he whispered. Then he bit her. Her neck. Right below the jaw, the mark bloomed in fire, and her heat exploded with it. She came, violently. His knot began to swell. Her walls clamped down on him, milking him for his seed, and he gave it to her. All of it. They didn't stop at one. They couldn't. The moon demanded blood. The bond demanded fulfillment. Hours passed. She was filled over and over again, her belly already heavy with the promise of life, her skin glowing, her body glowing, her womb glowing. And when the moon reached its apex, a final scream tore from her lips. Light exploded in the chamber. A mark appeared on her belly. A crescent rune, never seen before. Thorne collapsed on top of her, panting, eyes wide. "What is that?" he whispered. Maelina couldn't answer. She was already unconscious, but the doctor would. When Scylla arrived minutes later, she paled at the sight. "She's not just the surrogate," she whispered. "She's the carrier of the lost bloodline." "What do you mean?" Thorne growled. Scylla knelt beside Maelina's glowing body. "She's not just bearing a child, she's bearing twins. Twins with dormant royal blood. The Alpha King's blood." Thorne's breath caught. "That line was wiped out centuries ago, or so we thought," Scylla murmured. "But her mother, she must have hidden it, buried it, until the right Alpha woke it up." She looked up at him. "That's why the bond was so strong, why your wolf nearly lost control." Thorne swallowed. "And now?" "She's already pregnant," Scylla whispered. "And those babies, they aren't ordinary." She turned toward the ceiling. "They're the beginning of a new era." Chapter 6. The Bloodline Rebellion. Maelina woke to a storm, not of rain or wind, but of whispers. Voices crackled faintly in her ears, like echoes through a long corridor. Names she didn't recognize. Words in a tongue she'd never heard before, the ancient language of wolves. She opened her eyes to a dim-lit room, the ceremonial chamber she barely remembered. Her limbs were sore in the most intimate places, and her skin tingled as if lit from within. Then it struck her, she wasn't alone. Thorne was sitting beside her bed, fully clothed now, though his hair was disheveled and his golden eyes had dulled to ember. One arm rested on the table beside him, fingers curled tight in his palm, jaw set with an expression that frightened her more than anything she'd seen in him before, fear. Not for himself, for her, and for what she was becoming. "You're awake," he said softly, like saying it louder might shatter her. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. 2. She struggled to sit up. Pain flickered behind her ribs. She clutched her abdomen, then gasped, because it was no longer flat. Her stomach, though not swollen like late pregnancy, had begun to round subtly beneath her nightgown. A faint crescent glow, silver blue, still shimmered just below her navel like moonlight on a tide pool. Thorne noticed her panic instantly. "Easy," he said, reaching out but hesitating just before his fingers touched her skin. "You're safe. The bond took. The children are growing, faster than expected. I feel..." Maelina trailed off, overwhelmed. "I feel different, not just my body. Everything inside me is vibrating." "You're evolving," said another voice. Maelina turned. Scylla was standing in the doorway, a bundle of scrolls in her hands, her mouth set in a grim line. "I've been researching since the mark appeared," Scylla said, walking in. "It's not just the Alpha's bond. You've inherited something ancient, something sacred." "Sacred?" Maelina asked weakly. Scylla unrolled a scroll and held it out to Thorne. On it was a drawing of a woman with a glowing crescent under her belly, surrounded by 2 wolves, one gold, one black. The text beneath it was written in the old tongue. "Only one Omega has ever borne twins of the true Alpha King lineage," Scylla said. "She was called the Moon Mother, and her children changed everything." Maelina's fingers shook. "You think I'm..." "I don't think," Scylla cut in gently. "I know." Thorne stood abruptly. "They'll come for her," he said, pacing. "The moment the High Council learns she carries royal heirs, they'll claim she belongs to the bloodline. They'll take her from me. From us. Maelina looked between them. What does that mean? Take me? How? They'll say it's not your choice, Scylla whispered. They'll say your womb is no longer yours, that it belongs to the Alpha line of succession. That night, Thorne moved Maelina into his private quarters, deep in the heart of the Kaelwyn manor, behind double-reinforced steel and blessed stone. No one could enter without his blood, not even Scylla. It was more than protection. It was war preparation, because Thorne knew the scent of rebellion, and he could smell it in the wind. Meanwhile, in the northern mountains, a cloaked man stepped through a burning hallway, his boots crunching over glass and ash. All around him, the aftermath of his Alpha raid bled across the stone. Wolves were chained, Omegas weeping, dominance silenced. He stopped at a throne of carved obsidian. "My lord," one of his soldiers said breathlessly, dropping to one knee. "It's confirmed. The girl, she carries the twins, the Alpha Billionaire's heir, and the Moonmother mark." The cloaked man grinned, fangs flashed. "Then it's time," he murmured, "to claim what should have been mine." Back at Kaelwyn Estate, Thorne sat beside Maelina's bed that night, one hand resting lightly over her small, glowing belly. Her body radiated warmth now, as if a second heart had started beating inside her. "Are they okay?" she asked softly. "They're perfect," he whispered. "You're perfect." She reached for him. He leaned in, brushing his lips against her forehead. Then her voice broke. "I didn't think I'd survive this. Not just the heat, or the claiming. You." His eyes met hers. "I didn't think I'd survive you either." They kissed, slower this time. No fire, just warmth, belonging. A taste of something neither of them dared name yet, but it was growing. Like the life inside her. Like the bond between them. But that bond would be tested sooner than either of them imagined. At dawn, the first threat arrived, a black envelope delivered by Air Raven, sealed in the wax sigil of the Northern Blood Alpha. Lord Varen Locke. Thorne read it in silence, his jaw clenched tighter with each line. "What does it say?" Maelina asked. "It says," he growled, "that Lord Varen demands your surrender, that you are to be delivered to him before the next moon, or he'll come with his army to claim you himself." Maelina's face went cold. "Claim me? As what?" "As breeding property," Thorne said, throwing the letter into the fire. "He doesn't care about you. He only wants the twins." "And what are you going to do?" she whispered. Thorne stepped forward, voice low and deadly. "I'm going to show him what happens when you try to steal from a wolf who's already marked his mate." Chapter 7. Marked by moonfire. The manor was no longer safe. The moment the raven's black wings vanished over the tree line, the air around Kaelwyn Estate shifted, like a blade had sliced through the magic shielding the grounds. The wards flickered. The scent of smoke drifted through the windows even though no fire had been lit. Thorne could feel it. The land was warning him. Lord Varen wasn't bluffing. Maelina stood at the window of the manor's highest tower, her hands pressed to the cold glass as wind tangled her hair around her shoulders. Below her, the forest seemed endless, towering trees, moonlight slicing between them, but she could feel something waiting in the darkness. Hunting her. "Thorne," she said softly. "He's coming, isn't he?" Thorne stepped up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his hand settling over the warm, faintly glowing curve of her lower belly. "Yes," he said without lying. "He won't wait for the full moon." Her eyes closed, her body leaned into him. "I'm scared." He nuzzled her neck, voice raw. "Good. Stay scared. Fear sharpens instinct." She turned in his arms. "But you're not afraid?" He paused, and then said the words he hadn't dared say before. "I am," and then, quieter, not of Varen, of losing you. That night, they ran. With only Scylla, two of Thorne's most trusted guards, and a mare bred from Shadowblood lines, the small company left Kaelwyn Estate before the first stars rose. They traveled by tunnel beneath the old forest, through paths built by the ancestors of Thorne's bloodline, long before the wolves took their current names. The air was damp with time, the walls carved with sacred symbols of protection. Maelina could feel her heartbeat sinking with every step, but deeper underground her body began to change again. It started with heat, not arousal, something hotter, more electric. The twins inside her moved for the first time. Her hands flew to her belly with a gasp, but it wasn't just movement, it was energy. Her skin lit up, a faint bluish hue. Her eyes dilated, and her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Thorne caught her before she collapsed. "What's happening to her?" one of the guards shouted. Scylla knelt and peeled back the fabric of Maelina's tunic. The crescent moon mark on her abdomen had changed. It had deepened, now accompanied by lines of silver curling outward like sun rays. She's synchronizing with them," Scylla said. "The twins. They're reaching for her spirit, merging with her, becoming one." "You mean it's killing her?" Thorne demanded, voice low and cold. "No," Scylla said, eyes wide. "It's awakening her. When Maelina woke, she wasn't the same. Her skin had cooled, but her senses had sharpened. She could hear Thorne's heart from across the chamber. She could smell Scylla's anxiety, masked with lavender, and when she looked down at her hands, moonlight shimmered faintly beneath her skin. "What am I becoming?" she asked. Thorne looked up, crouched beside her sleeping mat in the sanctuary they had taken refuge in, deep in the fangroot forest, where wolves dared not howl. "The last time the Moon Mother bore twins," he said, "the earth cracked, mountains bled. A war ended in one night because she stood at the center of it and screamed." Maelina's breath caught. "I don't want to hurt anyone." "You won't," he said. "But I'm changing," she whispered. "Yes," he said again, "and I love every terrifying second of it." Their peace did not last. The next day, one of Thorne's guards returned from patrol, barely alive. He collapsed in the sanctuary entrance, his shoulder mauled, his arm half torn. "They've tracked her," he gasped. "Varen's men, not just wolves, wormkin. He's using blood mercenaries." "Where?" Thorne barked. "An hour south, they're scouting, waiting for nightfall." Maelina stood behind Thorne, her heart hammering, her hand over her womb. She could feel the twins stirring again, more aggressively this time, protective, furious. Scylla pulled Thorne aside. "We need to leave, again." "No," Maelina said. They turned to look at her. "No more running." That night, as the moon rose, still days from full, Maelina stepped outside the sanctuary alone. She wore a black gown laced with sacred salt thread. Her bare feet touched the ancient stones of the fangroot altar. Her hands trembled, but her gaze did not. She called for him, Varen Locke. Her voice didn't echo, it rippled. Somewhere, far off, wolves paused, eyes glowed in the dark. And then he came. Lord Varen appeared out of the forest like smoke. He was beautiful, terrifying. A dark alpha with eyes like burning coals and a jaw that promised violence. Tall, sharp, predatory. Maelina stared him down. "You carry the royal airs," he said, his voice like silk over razors. "They are mine," she said. "They are mine by birthright," he hissed. "Your womb is a vessel." "No," Maelina said, stepping forward. "It's a fortress, and I will burn you before I ever let you touch what grows inside me." Varen's eyes narrowed. Then he lunged. It happened faster than thought. Varen was a blur of black and silver, but before he could touch her, she exploded in light. Moonlight erupted from her skin. The mark on her belly blazed. A shield of glowing power surged outward like a tidal wave, slamming Varen backward into a tree with a sickening crunch. The air hummed with fury. Maelina's body hovered, just for a moment, her hair rising, her eyes lit from within. The twins' power surged through her like ancient lightning, and she spoke a name. Not Varen's, Thorne. And he was there, leaping over the rocks, claws drawn, a roar tearing from his throat. He slammed into Varen with the force of a god, and their fight began. The battle was brutal. Fangs, blood, fire. Thorne's claws shredded Varen's side, but the Dark Alpha was relentless. They fought like gods from ancient myth, slamming through trees, cracking stone, snarling and snapping with fury that made the world shake. Maelina watched, her hands glowing, whispering protection over the mark on her belly, and then Varen landed a strike. Thorne stumbled. Varen lunged toward Maelina. "No!" she screamed, and this time she moved. Her hands surged forward, and a wave of moonfire shot from her chest, blasting Varen midair. He screamed as light consumed him, burned him, shattered his body from the inside out, then silence. Smoke, ash. Thorne collapsed beside her, panting. She dropped to her knees. He pulled her into his arms. You destroyed him," he breathed. "No," she whispered. "We did." But deep in the ashes, something stirred. Varen's body was gone, but a whisper remained. A voice. A curse. "You are not safe, Moonmother. You have only awakened the first gate. The true enemy sleeps in the child's blood. When the twins are born..." His voice faded. But the threat remained. Back in the sanctuary, Thorne held Maelina as she shook in his arms. "You were incredible," he murmured against her hair. "I was scared." "Good," he said with a smile. "Fear sharpens instinct." She laughed through her tears. "I used your line. You made it sound better. And then, softly, between kisses, 'I love you.'" She froze. "I've loved you since I saw you step off that train, fragile and brave, fire wrapped in silk." Her eyes shimmered. "I love you too." And just like that, their bond wasn't just instinct, it was choice. Chapter 8. The Vow Beneath Moonstone. To marry an alpha is to bind your soul to a storm. That's what Silas said as she dressed Maelina in the ceremonial gown. It wasn't white. It was midnight blue, woven from fabric blessed by ancient wolves, layered with silver embroidery that shimmered only when touched by moonlight. At its center, embroidered in thread made of lunar crystal dust, was the mark that had begun to appear beneath Maelina's own skin, the glowing crescent moon, surrounded by twin orbs. A symbol of her womb, of her unborn children, of her power. Maelina stood barefoot on the sacred stone, heart pounding against her ribs as her reflection shimmered in the waterpool mirror beneath her feet. Around her, glowing blue lanterns floated in midair. The sacred cave of Moonstone Hollow was silent, except for the soft drip of condensation and the whisper of wind through vines. Scylla gently adjusted the veil over Maelina's crown of braided silver hair. "Are you ready?" she asked. Maelina's lips parted, her voice caught between fear and wonder. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready, but I want this." She touched her belly, which had grown more distinct, rounded, firm. Inside, the twins stirred in unison, responding to her emotion with gentle waves of warmth. "They can feel everything now," Scylla said softly. "The ceremony will imprint itself onto them. If love surrounds them, they'll be born with strength. If fear rules the moment, they'll inherit the shadows." Maelina took a deep breath and whispered, "Then let them be born from love." Meanwhile, Thorne stood alone. His ceremonial armor was dark and lined with lunar bone. Over his bare chest, white paint marked the ancient glyphs of his bloodline, each representing a vow. His long hair was tied back, and his golden eyes glowed faintly beneath the sacred torches. He stood on the opposite side of the hollow, where the altar of bonding rested, two crescent-shaped stones that had not been joined since the last royal alpha claimed his moonmate centuries ago. He could feel her scent, her heartbeat, her presence, and he was trembling, not from fear, from the weight of what she meant to him. Maelina wasn't just a surrogate anymore, she was his world, and he knew if he failed to protect her, if he faltered even once, the world would burn. The ceremony began, the cavern filled with the hum of ancient song. The officiant, a white-furred elder from the high howling peaks, stepped forward with a blade carved from starlight obsidian. "You stand before the moon, the earth, and each other," the elder intoned. "You are not only mates, you are bearers of the royal heirs. You are the future of this bloodline." The elder gestured to Maelina. She stepped forward, placing her hand on the obsidian blade. A thin line of blood welled up. Then she placed her hand on one crescent-shaped stone. The stone glowed. The elder turned to Thorne. He did the same. Their blood, Alpha and Omega, seeped into the sacred stone, feeding it, awakening it. The moment both stones lit with silver light, the hollow shook. The twins inside Maelina stirred more violently than ever. Her knees buckled slightly, but Thorne was there, catching her, cradling her with both arms. "Now," said the elder, "speak your vows." Thorne went first. He looked into Maelina's eyes, voice shaking with emotion. "I was born a weapon, raised to lead, feared, respected, obeyed, but never loved. I thought power would protect me. Then you came, soft and defiant, stronger than the warriors who follow me, braver than the alphas who fear me. You reminded me I'm not just a beast, I'm a man, and this man is yours." He took her hand, pressing it over his heart. "I vow to protect you even if it kills me. I vow to never let the world claim you. You are not a surrogate, you are mine. Mate, Queen, mother of my children. Tears shimmered in Maelina's eyes. Then she spoke. I was born nothing, she whispered. No name, no money, just scars. I didn't ask to be chosen. I didn't believe I was worthy. But you saw me. You never looked away. You held me even when I hated myself. You gave me more than a future. You gave me a reason to survive. She placed her hand on his cheek. I vow to fight beside you, to bleed with you, to raise our children not in fear, but in strength. You are not just a beast. You are my alpha, and I am yours. The elder stepped back. Then be joined, he intoned, by blood, by breath, by bond. The moment the two kissed, the glowing stones cracked, and from between them a beam of silver moonlight rose into the sky. It shot through the roof of the cavern, breaking through the surface above and lighting up the forest beyond. Every creature in the valley howled. The bond was complete. But with it, something else was released, far, far away, in the depths of a forgotten prison, bound in roots and bones. Something woke up. Later that night, the newly bonded couple rested in the warmth of their silken canopy tent, the ceremonial fires still burning around them. Thorne lay shirtless, his hand never leaving Maelina's side, his palm splayed protectively over her belly. Her hair was a mess of curls, and her lips were still swollen from the kisses they had stolen after the crowd dispersed. They hadn't yet consummated their bond, not in the sacred physical sense, but the craving was building, so was the heat between them. I feel them, Maelina murmured, curled into his chest. They're restless. They know something's coming. They're right, Thorne whispered, pressing his lips to her temple. We've made enemies by surviving, and worse ones by falling in love. Then let them come. He grinned into her skin. My dangerous little moon, but miles away, in the ruins of the Bleeding Grove. A cloaked woman walked barefoot across cursed earth. Her hair was white as bone. Her eyes, black voids with pinpricks of red. She knelt before a stone basin filled with old blood and whispered, Moon Mother has awakened. The prophecy lives. She dipped her hand into the basin and tasted it, then smiled. She will birth the royal twins, but only one shall survive, and the other shall belong to me. Chapter 9. One shall love, one shall kill. They did not sleep. After the ceremony, Maelina couldn't close her eyes. Her body hummed, not from fear or exhaustion, but from something ancient and primal, something awakened deep within her veins during the bond ritual. Her pulse beat in time with the twins inside her. Her soul ached, not from pain but from need. A need only Thorne could satisfy. She sat at the edge of the silk-draped bed inside their sanctified chamber, moonlight pouring through the open skylight, her long hair cascading over her bare shoulders like melted night. Thorne stood in the corner, watching her with hungry, glowing eyes. His shirt was gone. His ceremonial markings glimmered faintly across his chest and arms, symbols of alpha bloodline, strength, and eternal loyalty. But beneath them, his muscles were tense, his fists clenched, his wolf pacing just under his skin. I thought we weren't allowed to. After the ceremony, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Tradition says to wait until the twins crown, he murmured, stepping closer. But I don't give a damn about tradition. Her lips parted. I'm yours, she breathed. No, he said, kneeling before her, his golden eyes devouring every inch of her trembling body. You're mine to protect, but tonight, I become yours. And with those words the bond snapped. They made love like wolves born beneath a red moon. Not fast, not slow, but ancient. Thorne kissed her with reverence, then with fire, devouring her mouth, trailing his tongue down her collarbone, his teeth grazing the soft skin above her breasts, until she gasped his name like a prayer. Her body, swollen slightly from pregnancy, was worshipped. Her hips, her thighs, her belly. He pressed kisses over the mark, whispered to the twins, swore oaths to the womb that carried his future. And when he entered her, slow and deep, she arched with a cry, half sob, half euphoria. Maelina wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him impossibly closer. Thorne buried his face in her neck, groaning as her tight heat clenched around him. Their bond flared to life, visible this time, a ribbon of silver light threading between their chests. With every thrust, their souls locked deeper, their breaths synced, their hearts pounded like war drums. The twins inside stirred in rhythm. Power crackled in the air, until, Together, they shattered, her scream and his howl joining in one electric explosion of heat and moonlight. After, they lay entwined, skin to skin. Foreheads pressed, and Maelina whispered, "You feel like home." Thorne kissed her nose. "You feel like forever. But peace never lasts." The next morning, a storm blew in from the north, carrying more than wind and rain. It carried her. The seer, a girl no older than 17, with silver eyes and pale lavender skin, stepped barefoot into their sanctuary. Her arrival went unnoticed by the guards, cloaked in an invisibility granted by the old moon. She collapsed just inside the main chamber. Scylla found her and immediately called for Thorne. Maelina rushed out in her nightrobe, heart already racing. "She's a seer," Scylla whispered. "One of the moons faded, and she's bound to the twins." "How?" Thorne asked coldly. The girl's eyes fluttered open, and when she looked at Maelina, she wept. "I've seen you." Maelina knelt beside her. "What did you see?" The girl's voice trembled. "Two futures, two paths. One will destroy you, one will save the world." Maelina paled. "They're your children," the seer whispered. "But only one will walk the path of the moon." Thorne stepped forward, tense. "What about the other?" The girl's eyes rolled back, and in a voice not her own she chanted, "Born under twin crescents, blood of wolf and moon, one shall heal, one shall ruin. One shall love you beyond death, and one shall slit your throat before his first shift." The room went still. Scylla covered her mouth. The guards stepped back. Maelina trembled. "No," she said softly, "they're both innocent. They're both mine." The girl gripped Maelina's hand. "You can't stop it. The choice will come, and when it does, you must choose who to crown and who to curse." Thorne's voice broke the silence. "Get her a bed. She's exhausted." "No," the girl said. "I came to warn you, but they're already coming." She looked at Maelina. "They wear red robes. They worship the stillborn moon. They believe your womb is a gateway to death. They mean to cut the children from your body before the eclipse." Maelina's hand flew to her belly. The twins stirred, fiercely, not in fear, in defiance. That night, Thorne fortified the sanctuary. He called in allies, shifters from distant tribes, witches bound to his bloodline, old gods in exile. Every stone was blessed, every threshold warded. And still, Maelina couldn't sleep. She walked the stone halls alone, cradling her belly, whispering to the twins. "I won't let them hurt you," she murmured. Suddenly, the shadows around her shifted. A voice hissed from the corner. "You can't protect them forever." Maelina spun, nothing. But her mark flared with light, and deep within her, the twins pulsed, one warm and golden, the other cold, shadowed. She dropped to her knees, trembling, and in her mind, for the first time, she heard their voices, not words, but intent. Two souls, already forming, already aware. One reaching toward her light, one watching her from the dark. Chapter 10. The Children of Moon and Ruin. The sanctuary bled. It began with the smell. Rotting roses. Maelina woke with a start, the metallic scent of iron and wilted petals thick in the air. Her heart beat hard and fast, her fingers flying to her belly as the twins stirred sharply beneath her ribs, kicking, warning. Something was wrong. She sat upright on the mattress of sacred silks, sweat glistening on her temples despite the cool dawn air. Thorne wasn't beside her, not in bed, not even in the room. Only his warmth lingered on the sheets, and that smell. It was a warning. She rose quickly, barefoot and wearing only the ivory linen robe she'd fallen asleep in. The sanctuary outside their private chamber, once lit with blue fire torches, was dim, every lantern snuffed, the hallway cast in shadows that writhed too unnaturally. She called his name once. No answer, only a sound, a low, wet, dragging noise, somewhere beyond the corridor. She moved toward it slowly, hand on her belly, breath tight in her throat. Then she saw it. Blood, trailing in thick, gleaming lines across the sacred mosaic floor. It glistened red-black in the faint light, leading away from the ceremonial hall, down into the depths of the moonstone hollow. Maelina froze. One of the wolves who'd sworn loyalty to Thorne lay slumped in the doorway, his eyes wide, throat slashed, symbols carved into his chest. The mark of the cult, the stillborn moon. Her knees went weak. "Thorne," she whispered, Suddenly, a hand snatched her from behind. She screamed, but a warm, familiar voice growled into her ear. "I've got you, Thorne." He was behind her, his armor half on, blood at his temple, his golden eyes glowing with fury. "You shouldn't be out here," he rasped. "They breached the first ward." "How?" she whispered. "I don't know. They were inside before the sentries even scented them." He pulled her behind him, shielding her with his massive body as he moved down the corridor, leading her toward the war chambers. All around them, the sacred sanctuary had become a battlefield. Symbols scrawled in blood on the walls, dead guards, some human, some wolf, strewn across the floors, and everywhere, that smell. Rotting roses. "They're not just cultists," Scylla hissed, appearing from the shadows beside them, 2 knives in her bloodied hands. "They've made a pact with the Ashened Ones. Necromancy, blood binding. They want her," Thorne growled. "They're here for the twins." "No," Scylla said. "They're here for one of them." Maelina turned. "What do you mean?" But before Scylla could answer, the ground shook, and the sound that followed wasn't a bomb. It was a cry, a child's cry. But not born of life. No. It was the voice of something dead trying to crawl back into the womb. They reached the inner sanctum. Thorne barred the doors, locking Maelina, Scylla, and 3 remaining elite warriors inside. But Maelina wasn't calm. She pressed a hand to her belly. The twins were trembling, kicking violently. Her vision blurred. And then, it happened. She collapsed, eyes rolling back. And she fell straight into a vision, a future. 10 years from now, the Moon Palace in ruins. 2 boys stood opposite one another on a blood-soaked battlefield, both powerful, beautiful, alpha-blooded, royal, identical in body but not in soul. One wore silver armor, his hands glowing with lunar fire. The other stood shirtless, blood dripping from claws the color of night, his eyes burning red. "I never wanted to fight you," said the one in silver. "You were always the favorite," said the one in shadow. "She loved us both. She feared me." Then he lunged and drove his claws through his brother's chest. The vision broke as Maelina screamed. She woke in Thorne's arms. Sweat poured from her body. Her heart raced. Her pupils dilated. She clutched her belly. "They're going to kill each other," she gasped. "Our sons. They're going to kill each other." Thorne paled. "You saw it?" She nodded, sobbing now. "One is light. One is ruin. I can feel them splitting already, choosing." Scylla said nothing. But Thorne stood up and turned toward the guards. "Double the spellbound perimeter. Prepare the ancient rite." "Thorne," Maelina choked. "What are you doing?" "I'm not letting a vision decide our fate." "But what if it's true?" "Then we'll rewrite it." That night, they performed the rite of names. It was forbidden to name twins before birth in royal bloodlines. But Maelina insisted. "If I name them," she whispered, "I'll choose who they are." Not the prophecy. The names came in a whisper from her lips and her womb. This one with the warmth. His name is Lucan, moonborn, gentle, and this one, the shadow, strong, quiet. His name is Kael. Thorne knelt beside her. "Lucan and Kael," he whispered, kissing her belly. "You are not enemies. You are brothers. You are ours." And beneath her skin, the twins stilled, listening. But far beyond the hollow, the cult prepared its next move. And the woman in red, leader of the stillborn moon, watched the stars with eyes that no longer blinked. "She's chosen names," she said. "That means the souls are locked." Her acolytes knelt, heads bowed. "Then we have to sever one." The woman smiled. Her teeth were black. "We'll give her a choice," she hissed. "And when she chooses wrong, we'll take the other." Chapter 11, The Womb and the War. Maelina couldn't sleep, not even with Thorne's arm draped over her waist, his steady heartbeat thudding against her back like a protective drum. Not with the twin heartbeats echoing from within her own body, and not with the visions that had begun to bleed into her waking hours. It was happening more often now. Even with her eyes open, she would see flashes of what was to come. Lucan's warm eyes turned cold in betrayal. Kael's bloody fingers caressing her cheek as he asked her to choose him again and again and again. And always, the sound of a crown hitting the floor. A sound she somehow knew meant death. It had been 3 days since the cult's last breach. Thorne had tripled the security. strengthened the sanctuary's blood wards with ancient shifter runes, and summoned witches and warriors from distant territories. The sacred moon palace, hidden within the cliffs of Crescent Hollow, now thrummed with energy, a fortress cloaked in both magic and moonstone steel. But Maelina didn't feel safe, because the threat wasn't just outside anymore, it was inside her. She first heard Kael's voice while bathing. The temple tub was carved from enchanted obsidian, the water warmed with moonfire and soaked with herbs to soothe the body before childbirth. Her swollen belly was slick with rose oil floating on the surface like a pale divine bloom. The water stilled, and a voice echoed inside her skull. "You don't trust me." She froze. "Lucan?" she whispered aloud. "No, mother." Her heart stopped. It wasn't Lucan. Lucan's soul always felt soft, sunlight over skin, a gentle murmur in the background of her mind. This voice was different. Cold, silk wrapped around a blade. "I see the way you fear me. You think I'll kill him. But what if you're wrong? What if he kills me?" Her hands trembled. "You're not even born," she whispered. "And yet I know you better than he does. I remember before this body. Before the womb. Before him. Before who?" But the voice fell silent, and the water around her turned dark. Maelina told no one. Not even Thorne. Not yet. Because that voice, Kael's voice, it wasn't a threat. It was a warning. A child begging to be understood before it was too late, and God's helper, some part of her believed him. Later that night, Maelina found Thorne standing in the war chamber, half-armored, fists braced on the stone table carved with the map of the 5 shifter kingdoms. There were red markers along the southern border, dozens of them. Maelina didn't need to ask. They were cult strongholds. "They're surrounding us," Thorne muttered, choking us off. "You're going to ride out," she said flatly. He didn't deny it. "Only for a week. I have to gather our allies in person. Too many wolves have gone silent. If we don't strike first, they'll burn this place with you in it." She stepped forward. "I'm due in 2 weeks. I'll be back before then." "What if you're not?" He met her eyes then, glowing gold and torn. "Then I'll die trying to make a world safe enough for them to be born in." She bit her lip. "Take me with you." "No. I can help. I can—" "Maelina," he said, voice sharp. "Your place is here. With the child you fear," she snapped. He went still, and she regretted it instantly, but the truth sat between them like a blade. "You heard him too, didn't you?" she whispered. "Kael, you felt it. That darkness." Thorne turned away. "I don't fear our son," he said. "I fear what others will do to him if they sense that darkness before we do." Maelina's voice cracked. "I don't want to choose between them. Then don't." "But the prophecy, to hell with the prophecy," he growled. "They are ours. They are shifter princes of blood and moon. No cult, no seer, no gods will steal their fate." But as the words left his mouth, the moon turned red, and the wind began to howl. She felt the death before it reached the gates. Scylla burst into the room, her twin daggers drawn, her armor smeared with blood. "They've sent her," she hissed. "Who?" Thorne asked. "The Hollowed One." Maelina frowned. "What is that?" Scylla's voice dropped. "A former surrogate, one who bore a stillborn moonchild." Maelina went cold. "That's impossible. No, it's rare. But it's real. The cult can sometimes coax the soul of a cursed shifter into a womb. The baby kills its mother during labor. The body is reanimated. The child remains within, never born, but alive and twisted." Thorne swore. "She's breaching the wards." "She's already inside," Scylla whispered. "And she's calling for Maelina." The walls trembled. Maelina was ushered into the throne chamber, surrounded by guards, her breath heaving as the sanctuary echoed with a wet, dragging sound. The doors exploded inward, and there she stood, the Hollowed One, a woman in a white gown, now tattered and soaked in red. Her face was that of a once beautiful girl, but her eyes were empty sockets, oozing black ichor. Her belly was still swollen, her body bloated in an eternal state of false pregnancy. And something moved inside her. Not a baby. A curse. A soul unallowed to be born. She opened her mouth and screamed, and the sound shattered 2 torches on the wall. "Give me your womb!" she shrieked. The guards charged. They didn't make it 2 steps before she flicked her wrist and sent them flying with a pulse of sickly purple magic. Scylla lunged, daggers flashing. Thorne shielded Maelina with his body. The Hollowed One advanced. her swollen belly rippling as if the creature within clawed to be free. "He wants a brother!" she howled. "He wants Kael to come with him!" Maelina screamed. Her mark glowed, and suddenly the hollowed one froze. Then she looked directly at Maelina's stomach and smiled. "You've already chosen," she said. "You just don't know it." Then she collapsed, her body bursting into black fire. The cult had sacrificed her, just to deliver that one final truth. That night, Maelina lay curled on the throne dais, cradled by Thorne's arms, too shaken to move, too terrified to cry. "Do you think Kael sent her?" she whispered. "No," Thorne said gently. "But I think whoever wants him did, and I think he tried to protect me." Thorne didn't answer, but Maelina knew. Something inside her was choosing, aligning. Lucan was light. But Kael had a purpose no one could yet name. Chapter 12. The Blood Moon Cradle. The moon turned crimson the moment her water broke. Maelina was asleep in the high chamber, her belly cradled in a silk sling, dreams whispering half-formed lullabies through her mind. When it happened, a sharp pain, deep, guttural, twisted through her spine and seized her womb. Her eyes snapped open. She gasped, a moan tearing from her throat. And beneath her linen shift, warm wetness spread across her thighs. The scent of blood, too much blood, rose in the air like iron and roses. "Thorne," she gasped. "Thorne!" He burst through the doors before the second contraction hit. One look at the dark stain on the bed and he was at her side, lifting her with practiced, gentle hands. Her entire body trembled in his arms. "She's early," Scylla hissed, rushing in behind them. "Too early." "No," Maelina moaned, gripping the headboard as another contraction hit. "It's the moon, it's pulling them," she cried out, the sound echoing down the stone corridors. The sanctuary's healers came running. Witches followed. Scylla shut the doors and warded them with spell knives. And Thorne dropped to his knees beside the birthing mat, his forehead pressed to Maelina's swollen belly, whispering to his unborn sons. "You stay with her," he murmured. "You hold. You don't take more than she can give. Lucan, Kael, wait." But inside her, the war had already begun. They weren't waiting. The twins were fighting, not to kill each other, no, but to be first. Lucan, steady and glowing like sunlight under skin. Kael, curling and twisting like storm clouds behind her ribs. They pushed, pulled, one kicking against the other. Her womb, a battlefield. And Maelina? A trembling, bleeding cradle caught between their war. "She won't survive both," said the high healer. Thorne stood, trembling. "What does that mean?" Scylla's voice was grim. "It means we have to take one, first, to give her the strength for the second." "And if we choose wrong?" Thorne asked. The healer didn't answer. But Maelina knew. If the wrong son came first, he'd drain her of everything, her life, her blood, her soul. The other might never make it, or worse, he'd blame her forever. Another contraction hit, and Maelina screamed. But this time it wasn't pain she felt. It was a presence, inside her head, inside her soul. "Let me be born first." Kael's voice again, so clear, so cold. "He's not ready. I know how to protect you. I know how to protect him." She gasped. No, I can't. You're already bleeding. You won't survive both of us unless I come now." "Let me out, Mother." "Thorne," she sobbed. "He's talking to me. He knows." Thorne cupped her face. "Who?" "Kael. He says, if he comes first I'll live, but I don't know if I can believe him." Scylla knelt beside her, gaze sharp. "Trust your body. What does it want?" Maelina trembled. Her hands moved to her belly, and there, beneath her palm, Kael kicked once. Lucan curled inward, still and soft. He was yielding. Letting his brother win. "He knows," Kael whispered. "He trusts me. Why don't you?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm scared of you," she confessed. Silence. Then, "So am I." And with that, she screamed, and Kael was born. It wasn't a clean birth. It was fire. Blood and shadow and moonlight twisted together. The healers gasped as the air split in a burst of red light, and there, in a pool of shimmering blood, Kael emerged, silent and staring. Not crying, just watching, eyes dark as ink, hair wet and raven black. He didn't scream, he didn't squirm, he simply blinked and then turned his head toward Maelina. She collapsed, too weak, too pale. "Lucan," she whispered. Her hands trembled as Kael was handed to a nurse. Then, a second contraction hit. And this one felt pure. Lucan came into the world in a rush of silver light, soft and warm. His cry was immediate, high-pitched and desperate, his tiny fists curled in the air, skin glowing faintly under the light of the now crimson moon. Thorne sobbed, real sobs. Not the kind of cries kings made. The kind only a man makes when watching the woman he loves bring their sons, his whole world, into being. The twins were placed in Maelina's arms, one in each. Lucan nuzzled into her left breast, tiny mouth seeking warmth. Kael simply stared, no hunger, no sound, but 1,000 thoughts behind his ancient eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered to them both. "I didn't choose either of you. You chose me." Thorne wrapped his arms around them all. "We're never letting them go," he said. But deep in the hollow, as the blood moon waned, a whisper traveled through the cult like wildfire. "The moon has delivered the vessel. One is shadow. One is sacrifice. When they turn 16, one must die for the other to live." And in the chamber where she bled and wept and kissed her sons, Maelina felt a mark burn into her shoulder. A crescent, a wound. And she knew the war hadn't ended. It had just been born. Chapter 13. The Cradle and the Crown. The Moon Palace was quiet for the first time in days. The fires had been lowered to coals, the battle drums silenced. The walls, once echoing with the footfalls of warriors and witches, had gone still, and in the Queen's chamber, Maelina slept with her newborn sons cradled against her chest. Lucan, ever warm, lay nestled between her breasts, his cheek flush against her heart, the sound of her blood like a lullaby. He sighed in his sleep, the faintest glow radiating from his tiny skin, almost imperceptible, like dawn beneath a sheet of fog. Kael rested beside him, eyes open, watching the ceiling with a look no infant should wear, a gaze too ancient, too aware. He didn't cry, didn't stir, didn't feed. Yet he thrived, his skin flawless, his breath even, his presence so still it bent the air around him. He only blinked once when Thorne entered the room. The Alpha King had not slept. Blood stained his hands. 2 enemies had tried to breach the western cliffs during Maelina's labor. Thorne had slain one himself, ripping through armor and bone to make sure no spellcaster could so much as whisper her name. He stood at the edge of the bed, his war cloak still dusted in moon ash, his golden eyes softening at the sight of her, the woman who had not only carried his future, but bled for it. And gods, how beautiful she was, even with tear stains under her eyes and her hair tangled with sweat and oil, even with exhaustion carved into her bones and magic still smoldering along her wrists. She was his queen, and she had done what no woman had ever survived before. She had birthed both light and darkness, and lived. Maelina stirred. Her hand found his. "Is the border secure?" she whispered, still half in dream. Thorne sank to one knee. "Yes, for now, you saved us." She shook her head faintly. "I only bore them." "No," he murmured, kissing her wrist. "You bore the prophecy." Her breath hitched. "Have they told you?" Thorne nodded. "The mark on your shoulder." He gently pushed aside her gown. A crescent moon etched in blood-colored ink burned into her pale skin. "It's the sigil of the Cradle Queen." Maelina's lips parted. "But I'm not royal." "Not in blood," Thorne whispered. But the prophecy didn't require a crown. It required a heart untouched by darkness, a womb unclaimed by war, a woman willing to love the child others feared. Maelina swallowed. "And I'm the only one who could love Kael." Thorne looked at their son. Kael blinked once, then turned his gaze toward them. "I fear what he might become," Thorne said. "But more than that, I fear what the world might do to him before he gets the chance." Later that night, Scylla returned with a scroll. It had been retrieved from the wreckage of the cult priestess's tomb, burned to blackened paper but still legible by moonlight. The prophecy, or what remained of it. Maelina held it with trembling hands, reading the words aloud. "When 2 sons of moonblood are born of virgin fire, one shall rise with the sun, one with the grave. The cradle shall burn, and from ash, the throne. To choose one is to destroy the other." Silence. Thorne's voice broke it. "They believe you'll choose one." Maelina's voice cracked. "They're wrong. I'll choose neither, I'll choose both. Silas stepped forward, grim. Then the world will come for them. The witches, the shifters, even your own kind, Thorne. They will call Kael a beast, a false alpha, a shadow-blooded heir. Maelina stood, swaying but strong. I don't care. I will burn the world down before I let anyone hurt them. But Kael had already begun to change. That night, Maelina awoke to the sound of whispers, not outside, inside. She sat up, heart racing, and looked into Kael's cradle. He wasn't asleep, he wasn't even blinking, he was levitating. His tiny body hovered inches above the bedding, arms spread slightly, the shadows of the room folding in around him like smoke drawn to fire. His lips parted, and in a voice not his, a voice far too deep, he said, "The god inside me remembers." Maelina froze. Kael. He lowered slowly back to the mattress. His eyes fluttered shut, and when she lifted him into her arms, his body was soft, warm, normal. But the scent of ash lingered in the air. The next morning, Lucan refused to be near his twin. The nurses noticed first. The second they placed both boys into the same crib, Lucan began to wail, screaming until his lungs gave out. But when Kael was moved away, silence. Lucan curled into Maelina's chest, breathing steady. Kael, across the room, watched with expressionless eyes. Maelina stood between their cribs, torn in two. That night, a secret council convened. Thorne, Scylla, the witches, the war priests, and Maelina. The scroll was laid flat, the moon hung low, and the question was asked. What is Kael? Silence. Then one of the witches stepped forward, pale as bone. Her name was Mira, eldest of the Moon Sisters, and she wore her silver hair in coils wrapped with thorns. Long ago, she said, there was a god who demanded worship from the wolves. He was not kind, he was not light, he was not death either. But what came after death, the silence, the rot, the power of the forgotten, they called him Kailenos. Maelina gasped. No! Mira nodded. That name was lost to history. Until now. Your son bears his echo. Thorne stood. You're saying Kael is possessed? No, Mira whispered. I'm saying he was born remembering who he once was. A reborn god. Maelina stood, lips trembling. I don't care what he is, he's mine. Scylla said nothing, but her dagger was already resting at her hip. Maelina saw it, and her body turned to fire. Draw that blade again in his presence, she whispered, and I will cut you down myself. Thorne took her hand. The entire room watched her, and in that moment the war was no longer theoretical, no longer in the future. It was now. Outside the Moon Palace, the shadows of 1,000 shifters began to gather. The cult had sent Kael's name to every kingdom. The word Godspawn was being whispered in royal courts, in temples, in war camps. And the people were afraid, not of Thorne, not of Maelina, not even of Kael, but of what a mother might do to protect a son she would never abandon. Chapter 14. The night the stars bled. The wind howled through the eastern wing of the Moon Palace like a chorus of ghosts. Candles guttered, tapestries trembled, the nursery, warm and golden just hours ago, had turned bone cold. Maelina woke with a start. Her arms were empty, Lucan's crib, quiet. She rose, a growing panic beating in her chest. She crossed the nursery floor barefoot, every shadow stretching toward her like a reaching hand. Lucan lay in his crib, asleep but shivering. And Kael's crib was empty. Her scream pierced the night. Guards burst in. Thorne was the first behind them, a robe flung over bare skin, his eyes glowing gold in the dark. Where is he? Gone, Maelina rasped. He was just here. He was. But then Scylla stepped through the doorway, and she wasn't alone. Behind her, dragging across the polished marble, was the corpse of a man neither of them recognized. A shifter. Black robes, a ceremonial knife still clenched in one hand. His face was frozen in horror. His throat had been slit, not by blade but by something else, burned from the inside out. His body was covered in silver ash. He's not one of ours, Scylla said coldly. I found him in the cradle chamber, and this? She opened his hand. A scrap of parchment fell out. A bounty. One word written in blood-red ink. Kael. Maelina clutched the note, knuckles white. They tried to kill him. Thorne stared at the corpse. Did they succeed? A voice answered from behind them. No. Maelina turned. Kael stood barefoot at the edge of the nursery, untouched by blood, his curls wild, his nightgown soaked in something that shimmered like starlight. He was not crying, not confused. He stared up at her and said, in a voice clear as glass, he tried to hurt Lucan. "So I unmade him." Silence. Maelina knelt before her son. "You what?" Kael tilted his head. He smelled like poison. His mind was dark. He was going to slit Lucan's throat while he slept. "But, how do you know?" Kael blinked. "I've done it before." That night, they placed 3 wards around the nursery. Scylla personally enchanted the walls with soulburn runes. Thorne posted 7 guards outside, each bearing silver-tipped weapons and bound by blood oath. But Maelina? She never left. She sat between their cribs, one hand on each son, her back straight, eyes wide open, not blinking, not breathing. Because something inside her knew this wasn't over. The attempt was only the first. The prophecy had reached more ears than she could count, and somewhere out there, someone powerful wanted Kael dead before his 2nd birthday. By the 3rd night, Maelina stopped sleeping altogether. Her skin grew pale, her hair dulled. Lucan grew more restless, whimpering in his dreams, and Kael began speaking in his sleep, or rather, something began speaking through him. She first heard it at midnight, when she went to wet a cloth for Lucan's fevered brow. Kael was muttering, low, rhythmic, not language, chanting. Words older than the palace, older than wolves, older than gods. She froze. Turned. He lay still in his crib, lips barely moving, eyes closed. But the shadows above his bed moved, twisting, folding, spiraling toward the ceiling like smoke. She reached for him. The air burned her fingers. And then, Kael's eyes snapped open, solid black. And he said, "There is a temple beneath the cradle. A crown still sleeps there. You must bring me before it wakes." She didn't understand, not at first. But 2 nights later, in the Grand Library, she found it. A single map, hidden behind 7 false drawers, drawn in charcoal and etched with gold. A secret wing beneath the palace, forgotten for centuries. Buried after the last Blood Moon War, the Temple of Kaelinos, the god of night tongues, the god of chosen wombs, the god of reborn sons. She brought the scroll to Thorne. He read it in silence. And when he looked up, there was fear in his eyes. "I never wanted this for them," he said. "You didn't choose this," Maelina whispered. "I did, no. You loved them. That's different. Love is not a weapon." She smiled bitterly. "It is when I wield it." That night they descended, through the sealed crypt, through the tunnel of teeth, through the midnight gate carved with runes no one dared translate. Maelina held Kael in her arms. Thorne walked beside her. Lucan was left above with Scylla, under layered protection spells. The deeper they walked, the colder it became. But Kael was warm against her chest, burning, even. At the bottom of the stairs was a chamber carved into the mountain. Ancient, vast, lit only by the glow of a single floating crystal, pulsing like a heartbeat. There, in the center of the floor, was a crown, carved of obsidian and bone, set with stones that bled red light. Kael reached for it. And Maelina let him go. He stepped barefoot onto the dais. A wind rose, though they were deep underground. The crown lifted, turned, and lowered onto his infant head. Maelina shouted, "No, he's just a..." But the moment the crown touched him, it vanished, disintegrated into ash. Kael fell backward. Thorne caught him. The infant's skin shimmered, and across his chest, a mark burned. A crown made of thorns circling a crescent moon. The final symbol of the heir of Kaelinos. Maelina crumpled to her knees. "He's marked," she whispered. And Thorne said the words neither of them wanted to speak. "One day, you may have to choose, between Kael and Lucan, between the god and the boy." She looked up, eyes wild. "No, I already chose. I chose both." And in her heart, she made a vow if the world demanded sacrifice, it wouldn't be her sons. It would be the world itself. Chapter 15, The Boy Who Spoke Fire. The Moon Palace had become a fortress of silence. Since the crowning beneath the cradle, not a soul dared speak Kael's name aloud. Even the most seasoned witches, those who'd once danced barefoot in blood and summoned storms with their voices, now muttered blessings under their breath every time he passed by. He was just an infant, barely able to toddle, and yet the air around him shifted like he carried the tides within him. Children cried in his presence. The wolves refused to look at him. Some said he had no scent, others claimed he smelled like burnt roses. But Lucan still smiled whenever Kael came near. Though his eyes watched too carefully, and the moment Kael slept, Lucan would retreat into Maelina's arms, burying his head into her chest as though her heartbeat was the only thing keeping the world from unraveling. It began the night of the eclipse. Unplanned, unforeseen. A rare cosmic shadow fell across the moon palace, casting the entire citadel into blue-gray silence. No wolves howled, no candles stayed lit. It was as though the sky had blinked, and all the fire in the world had gone out. Maelina had taken the boys to the highest tower for air. Lucan clung to her neck, his small hands curled into her hair. Kael stood upright in her lap, one hand outstretched toward the darkened moon. Then he turned, and for the first time in his life he spoke without ancient tongues. A single word. Run. A gust of wind slammed against the glass. Lucan began to cry, sharp, desperate sobs that echoed like an alarm. Kael didn't flinch. Maelina stood immediately, tensing. "What do you see?" she asked, not sure why she spoke as though Kael could answer. He raised his small hand and pointed. The door behind them creaked open. No one stood there, but the shadows began crawling toward them. They ran. Maelina scooped both boys into her arms and bolted down the tower steps, heart pounding, her bare feet slapping against cold stone. Kael stared silently over her shoulder. Lucan sobbed against her chest as if some unseen agony was cutting through him from within. By the time they reached the main corridor, Scylla was waiting, dagger drawn, eyes wide. "Where is Thorne?" Maelina cried. Scylla didn't answer. She nodded toward Lucan. "Listen to him." Maelina looked down. Lucan was no longer crying. He was whispering. A name, over and over again. Not Kael's, not hers, but a word that hadn't been spoken aloud in the palace for over a century. The Ethereum. Silas staggered back. "How does he know that name?" "I don't know what it is," Maelina said. "I do." Silas' face paled. "It's where the gods were once buried." That night, the palace council convened in secret. Thorne returned from the southern borders, storm-streaked and blood-stained. The cult had moved. 1,000 believers had gathered in the ruins of the Black Cathedral, and they had a child with them, a decoy prophet crowned with bones. But Kael's name was on every banner, every prophecy, every prayer, and now Lucan had spoken a forbidden name. The room stilled when Maelina revealed it. "The Ethereum," she whispered. "My son said it as though he remembered it." "He doesn't," Silas said. "He couldn't." "Then how?" "Because," Thorne said quietly. "Lucan is beginning to see." That night, Maelina barely slept. The boys were placed in the royal sanctum beneath 7 layers of spellwork and 3 rings of guards. But Maelina felt no peace. She paced the halls until dawn, her mind a tangle of memory and fear. At sunrise, a servant handed her a sealed letter. There was no name. Only a wax seal shaped like a crescent moon curled around a burning tree. Maelina felt her breath leave her. She had seen that mark once, on a ribbon hidden in a chest her foster mother had left behind. She broke the seal. The letter read, "I was once a vessel too. They erased me, hid my bloodline, but I never stopped watching you. If you want the truth about Kael, and yourself, come to the mirror beneath the 3rd moon tower. Bring no guards, only your shadow. Your mother, Elhira." Maelina dropped to the floor. Her mother. Alive? But how? Why now? Why had she waited until Kael was born? She stared down at the letter for what felt like an eternity, and then she stood. She had one answer now. She needed the rest. That night, while the palace dined under candlelight and the twins slept in the sanctum, Maelina slipped through the forgotten corridor that led beneath the 3rd tower. There, hidden behind a wall of cold stone, was a mirror. Tall, oval, framed with bone, and for a moment, it breathed, not literally, but the glass pulsed like a heartbeat. Maelina reached out, the surface rippled, and then a face appeared, her own, but older, tired, with eyes that bled silver. "Elhira," she whispered. The reflection nodded, and began to speak. "You are not the first to bear a god. But you may be the last, because the other vessels, they died before the children could awaken. The cult learned how to stop them. You, Maelina, you're the only one who survived the birth of a divine heir." Maelina stepped closer, heart aching. Why didn't you come to me? I needed you. I thought you were dead." "I would have died," Elira said. "They tried to kill me the moment I conceived. Your father hid me, but I had to give you up or they would have found us both." "And now?" Maelina asked. Elira's voice trembled. "They know you exist. They know Kael was born. They know Lucan speaks the name of their prison, and they are coming." When Maelina returned to the sanctum, dawn was rising. She opened the chamber door and stopped. Kael was levitating again, eyes black, but this time Lucan was standing beneath him, one hand raised, and from Lucan's palm, flames danced, gentle, controlled, bright enough to cast golden shadows. Maelina didn't speak, neither child moved. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath. Then Kael slowly lowered to the crib. Lucan stepped back, and both boys smiled at each other, as if they had finally recognized something. Not just brotherhood, but balance. Maelina walked to them and collapsed to her knees, overcome. Her mother's words still echoed in her skull, and she now knew, more than ever, Lucan wasn't just a second son. He was the anchor, the light to Kael's dark, the flame to the void, and without him, Kael would lose himself. Without Kael, Lucan would burn the world down. And now? The gods were stirring. The cult was watching. The palace was cracking from the inside. And Maelina had to decide. Would she let fate unfold, or would she write a new one with her own blood and fire? Chapter 16. The Man Who Claimed the Moonborn. At dawn, the air over the moon palace split like cracked glass. A tremor passed through the foundation, silent, subtle, and wrong. None of the guards felt it, none of the mages noticed. But Maelina did. She woke from sleep as though ripped from a dreamless void, her heart pounding, her skin prickled with frost. Kael and Lucan stirred beside her. Lucan whimpered softly, curling into the crook of her arm. Kael simply sat up, eyes open, gazing directly at the window. "Someone is here," he whispered. And outside, far beyond the garden gate, a figure cloaked in bone-white robes had stepped into the first light of morning. His presence was immediate, wrong, like a stitch torn from fate's tapestry. He walked slowly through the palace gates. Guards moved to stop him, but each one faltered. Their weapons trembled in their hands. One guard began weeping, another dropped to his knees and whispered prayers in an ancient dialect even he didn't know. The man walked untouched through the grand hall. He wore a silver mask, no eyes, no mouth, just a smooth oval etched with sigils of the old faith. His hands were pale, long-fingered, inked with spiraling brands of devotion, or possession. By the time Thorne arrived, the man was already in the inner sanctum. He stood before the twin cradles, one hand raised, not toward Kael, but toward Lucan. "Step away from them," Thorne growled, voice tight with rage. The masked man did not turn. Instead, he spoke with a voice that was both aged and infantile, as though he echoed 100 others. "I come in peace. There is no peace for your kind," Thorne snapped. Maelina entered seconds later, barefoot, dressed in a silk shift that shimmered like starlight. She'd been feeding Kael only moments ago. His scent still clung to her skin. When she saw the man, her eyes flared silver. "I know you." The man turned to her, slowly, as though the moment itself bowed in reverence. "You should," he said softly. "You dreamed of me before you ever bled." Maelina's breath caught. "You're the one who marked the scroll, the crescent moon and burning tree, the symbol her mother had feared, the mark sewn into her nightmares before Kael was ever conceived." He nodded. "I am the last shepherd, and I am Kael's father." Silence, like the moment before a blade finds flesh. Thorne stepped in front of the cradles. "Lies. I chose her, I bound her, I fed her blood. I watched her bear him. You carried him," the shepherd whispered, looking at Maelina. "You nourished him. But I seeded him with starlight. You felt it, didn't you? That night, in your dreams, the pull, the voice that told you to accept the contract." She staggered back. Because she had felt it. That voice that told her say yes, that dream of fire and gold. But she had always thought it was her instinct, her intuition. She never considered. "You never touched me," she whispered. "No," the shepherd said gently. "You touched me, when you agreed to carry destiny in your womb." Lucan began to cry. Kael stirred. The shepherd stepped forward, but Maelina's scream tore through the chamber. "Don't touch them!" and the walls of the sanctum shook. A pulse of raw power surged from her chest, knocking the shepherd back. His mask cracked, and beneath it was a face she recognized, her own father's, or rather, the man she thought was her father, the man who raised her, fed her, taught her to hide. "Elian," she whispered. You died in the wars." "I did," he said, "but the god inside me didn't. It lived on, in you. And now, in Kael." Maelina fell to her knees. "I'm your daughter?" "You are my vessel," he corrected gently. "No, I'm their mother." "You were never just that," he said. "You were born to birth the god twins, one to open the gate," he nodded toward Lucan, "and one to sit upon the throne of night." Thorne was trembling, not from fear, from rage. "You used her," he growled. "You used me." "You loved her," the shepherd said. "I did not force that, and what she bore is more than even I could shape." He turned to Kael. "Come to me, my son." Kael blinked, and in a voice not his own, he said, "You are not my father. You are just the first fire in my bones. The flame is mine now." And Kael lifted his hand. A crack of white heat split the floor. The shepherd was thrown back, crashing through the sanctum doors, and Maelina caught Kael as he fell, weak, into her arms. Scylla arrived seconds later, spell already ignited in her palm, but Maelina held up a hand. "It's done." Thorne dropped to his knees beside her. Kael whimpered. Lucan reached for his brother, and the moment their hands touched, both boys stilled, perfectly calm, light and dark, night and flame, balanced, again. Later that night, Maelina sat in the palace garden, barefoot in the moonlight, both twins asleep against her shoulders. She had not wept, not yet, but her hands trembled. "You were never meant to be a mother," a voice said. She looked up. Alira stood in the shadows of the rose arch. She stepped forward, pale and glowing. "I was told the same," she continued. "But I was wrong." Maelina stared up at her. "How do I protect them?" "You don't," Alira said softly. "You stand beside them. And when the storm comes, you burn with them." As the moon reached its apex, Maelina made a vow. No more running, no more secrets. Kael was not a monster. Lucan was not a weapon. They were hers. And she would become their sword, their fire, their mother. And anyone who tried to steal them again would learn what happened when a goddess was cornered. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you want a part 2, kindly comment below. If you loved it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.